Florida declared war on the United States, a man got swallowed alive by his own bedroom floor, and there are laws so unhinged that someone actually had to sit down and write them. And that's before we even get to the people. We found 71 of the most shocking, ridiculous, and genuinely unbelievable things from one single state that will make you question everything you thought you knew about America. Facts buried in history books, laws still on the books today, and fails so legendary they broke the internet. Stick around, because by number 71 you will not believe this place is real. Tell me in comments right now if you think you already know Florida, because you don't. 1. Key West once looked the United States government dead in the eye and said, "We quit." In 1982, after Federal Border Patrol set up a roadblock treating locals like foreigners entering their own country, Key West Mayor Dennis Wardlow drove to a microphone, declared the independent Conch Republic, symbolically surrendered 60 seconds later, and immediately demanded $1 billion in foreign aid. The federal government never responded. Key West still throws a week-long party every single year celebrating the whole ridiculous moment. 2. In Sarasota, Florida, a woman cannot legally belt out her favorite song on a public street if she is wearing a swimsuit. Somebody in Sarasota actually sat down, picked up a pen, and wrote this into law. Nobody knows which singing swimsuit woman triggered this decision, but somewhere in Sarasota's history, one lady was clearly having too good a time on a sidewalk, and an entire city government decided enough was enough. The law still exists today. 3. Florida sits on a giant slab of limestone that secretly dissolves in water underneath your feet every single day. Every single one of Florida's 30,000 lakes was not carved by glaciers or shaped by rivers like normal lakes across America. Each one formed because the ground simply collapsed inward, creating a hole that filled with water. Tourists stand beside these sparkling, beautiful lakes taking photographs with absolutely no idea they are admiring a glorified sinkhole. Florida essentially tricked the entire world into thinking it has gorgeous natural lakes. 4. Florida gets struck by lightning over 1.4 million times every single year, and somehow chose to make this a personality trait. The state proudly carries the official title of Lightning Capital of North America, like it is something to brag about. While residents in other states check weather apps for rain, Floridians casually step outside during electrical storms, as if nothing unusual is happening. Scientists have studied this phenomenon for decades. Florida residents have simply accepted that the sky attacks them regularly and decided that is completely normal behavior. 5. A Florida man once experienced what he personally considered a genuine life emergency and dialed 911 not once, but 3 separate times. The crisis was that his local McDonald's had completely run out of chicken McNuggets. The responding officers arrived, reviewed the situation, saw and filed an actual police report that became permanently available to the public. The woman behind the counter reportedly offered him a refund. He did not want a refund. He wanted his McNuggets and felt the government should be involved in solving this problem immediately. 6. The Seminole Wars dragged on for 42 exhausting years, making them the longest military conflict between Native Americans and the United States government in all of American history. What makes this even more remarkable is that they never officially ended. No peace treaty was ever signed. No formal surrender happened. The United States government essentially fought Florida's Seminole people for 4 decades, gave up, walked away, and quietly hoped nobody would ask questions. The Seminole tribe of Florida technically remains undefeated against the United States military to this very day. 7. Someone in Florida's local government once sat down with a pen and officially made it illegal to pass gas in a public place after 6 p.m. on Thursdays. An actual human being proposed this. Other actual human beings discussed it. Then they voted and wrote it into a real local ordinance that became law. Nobody has ever been able to fully explain which specific Thursday incident triggered this legislative emergency. Florida has thousands of laws, but this particular one raises the most questions about what exactly was happening at Thursday evening gatherings across the state. 8. Florida's highest natural point is a small hill called Britton Hill, standing at just 345 feet above sea level, making it officially the lowest high point of any state in the entire United States of America. Every other state has mountains, ridges, or at minimum a respectable peak, Florida looked at its options and offered Britton Hill. Hikers who make the journey to stand at Florida's absolute highest natural elevation are essentially standing on something that most other states would classify as a slight inconvenience in a parking lot. 9. A Florida man successfully broke out of jail, which is already an impressive enough achievement. But then he did something that no criminal strategist in history has ever recommended. He broke back into the exact same jail he just escaped from because he had forgotten his shoes inside his cell. Security officers found him climbing back through the same exit point he had used to escape just hours earlier. He was rearrested on the spot still barefoot, which means his entire dangerous jailbreak mission accomplished absolutely nothing except adding more charges to his record. 10. The 1928 Okeechobee hurricane tore through Florida, killing over 2,500 people in one of the deadliest natural disasters in American history. The majority of victims were black farm workers living near Lake Okeechobee, whose deaths were deliberately kept out of mainstream news coverage for decades simply because of who they were. White victims received proper burials and memorials. Many black victims were buried in mass, unmarked graves. It took nearly a century before any significant national attention was paid to what actually happened to the real victims of that storm. 11. Florida has a law, sitting quietly on the books, stating that an unmarried woman cannot legally parachute on Sundays. Not a married woman. Specifically, an unmarried woman. Someone in Florida's legislative history looked at the growing sport of skydiving, reviewed the participant list, and decided that single women jumping out of airplanes on the Lord's Day was the specific problem that needed addressing. Married women apparently had full Sunday skydiving privileges. The law was never repealed and continues to exist today, raising enormous questions about the reasoning of everyone involved in writing it. 12. Florida man did not become the world's most famous disaster human by accident, and he became famous because of a law called the Sunshine Law, which forces every single arrest record in Florida to become instantly searchable public information. While other states quietly file away their chaos, Florida legally cannot hide it. Journalists, board office workers, and curious strangers can search any Florida arrest at any time for free. So every ridiculous decision every Florida resident has ever made while getting arrested is permanently available for the entire internet to enjoy forever. 13. The 1935 Labor Day hurricane that slammed into the Florida Keys was so catastrophically violent that it did not just destroy buildings. It sandblasted the skin and clothing completely off the bodies of people caught outside. Survivors described finding victims who looked like they had been scrubbed raw by the storm itself. It remains the most intense hurricane ever recorded to make landfall anywhere in the United States. Over 400 people died, including World War I veterans living in government work camps, who were given almost no warning before the storm arrived. 14. The city of Pensacola, Florida passed a law making it illegal to roll a barrel down a public street. This alone is already a strange enough law to raise questions, but Florida being Florida could not stop there. The law includes a specific clause stating that the fine doubles if the person rolling the barrel is actually inside the barrel at the time. Pensacola's city government apparently experienced enough barrel-related street incidents to require 2 separate levels of punishment, depending on whether the barrel was occupied or unoccupied during the offense. 15. Edward Leeds Calnan weighed under 100 pounds, stood barely 5 feet tall, had no engineering degree, and single-handedly built an entire castle out of massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 30 tons, in Homestead, Florida. He worked exclusively at night so nobody could watch him. No crane was ever spotted. No construction crew ever showed up. Neighbors reported hearing nothing unusual. So scientists and engineers have visited Coral Castle for decades and still cannot fully explain how one tiny man quietly moved millions of pounds of stone completely alone without anyone ever witnessing a single thing. 16. A Florida man named Joshua James once decided the Wendy's drive-through window needed some excitement and threw a live alligator directly through it at the employees working inside. The alligator was real. The Wendy's was real. The employees were genuinely terrified. When officers asked Joshua why he did it, his official response was that he thought it would be funny. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. Florida courts had to formally consider whether a live alligator qualified legally as a deadly weapon, and ultimately concluded that yes, it absolutely did. 17. Florida is the only place on the entire planet Earth where alligators and crocodiles naturally share the same wild habitat without any human intervention. So every other location on Earth has one or the other. Florida decided that having just alligators was not nearly enough prehistoric danger and arranged for both species to coexist in the same swamps and waterways. Scientists consider this genuinely remarkable. Florida residents consider this a Tuesday. Tourists visiting the Everglades are often photographed standing dangerously close to both species simultaneously without fully processing what they are looking at. 18. South Florida has a law on the books requiring anyone who ties an elephant to a parking meter to pay the parking fee just as they would for any standard vehicle. The law does not explain what counts as the elephant's license plate. It does not clarify whether the meter covers just the elephant or any items attached to the elephant. It provides no guidance on how long one elephant is permitted to remain at a single meter. Florida legislators apparently felt the payment requirement was the most important detail to nail down and left everything else open to interpretation. 19. Disney World planners confidently predicted that around 10,000 visitors would show up on opening day in October 1971, which seemed like a perfectly reasonable estimate. Instead, 46,000 people arrived simultaneously. Every highway leading to the park locked up completely for 7 straight hours. The parking system collapsed immediately. Food vendors ran out of supplies before noon. Walt Disney's brother Roy, who was running the company at the time, reportedly walked through the gridlocked chaos with an expression that witnesses described as a man deeply reconsidering every decision he had ever made in his entire life. 20. A Florida man arrived at his local tax office with a potato sack containing his entire $1,200 tax payment in single-dollar bills and presented it to the clerk at the counter, fully expecting this to be processed without any issues. The tax office staff looked at the sack. They looked at the man. They informed him they would not be counting 1,200 individual dollar bills by hand that afternoon. He argued this was legal tender and therefore legally acceptable. They disagreed. So he was eventually escorted out still holding his potato sack full of singles, having paid absolutely nothing. 21. In 2013, a Florida man named Jeff Bush was sleeping peacefully in his bedroom in Seffner, Florida, when the ground beneath his house simply opened up and swallowed him whole. A massive sinkhole collapsed directly under his bedroom in the middle of the night while he was asleep. His brother heard screaming and ran in to find the entire floor had disappeared. Rescue crews spent days attempting to recover Jeff Bush, but his body was never found. The house was eventually demolished and bulldozed over the hole. Jeff Bush is still down there somewhere beneath a Florida suburb. 22. Florida has over 1,100 golf courses, making it the most golf-saturated state in all of America. The Florida Tourism Board proudly markets golf and wildlife as essentially the same leisure experience, which makes complete sense because alligators casually wander onto golf courses across the state on a daily basis. Golfers in Florida have developed an unofficial rule about retrieving balls that land near water because whatever is sitting in that water is almost certainly not a log. And Florida essentially turned a prehistoric apex predator into a golf course hazard and called it a tourist attraction. 23. Florida has a law stating that keeping a goat inside a residential apartment is illegal unless that goat is officially registered as an emotional support animal. This means somewhere in Florida's history, a person successfully argued to a mental health professional that their emotional and psychological well-being depended entirely on having a goat living inside their apartment. A licensed professional agreed, signed the paperwork, and that goat became a legally protected emotional support goat. Florida did not close this loophole. Florida looked at it, shrugged, and moved on to other problems. 24. The Florida Everglades is the only Everglades ecosystem on the entire planet, and it is also the largest subtropical wilderness in the United States, covering an area roughly the size of Connecticut. Despite being completely irreplaceable and scientifically unique, humans have managed to destroy over half of it since 1900 through drainage projects, farming, and urban development. Scientists describe the Everglades as one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world. South Florida responded by putting an alligator on the license plate and continuing to drain it while simultaneously marketing it as a must-see natural wonder to tourists. 25. A Florida woman named Jennifer Camacho was arrested after getting into a heated dispute with her boyfriend that escalated to the point where she felt the most appropriate response available to her was to strike him with a breakfast sandwich. The sandwich in question was a full loaded item. The argument was specifically about who had eaten the last French fries. Witnesses confirmed the sandwich made full contact. Her boyfriend required no medical attention, but did file a police report. Florida courts processed this case completely straight-faced because, by Florida standards, this was a relatively calm domestic situation. 26 to Key West, Florida, has a cemetery that functions less like a place of mourning and more like a comedy venue that happens to contain human remains. The headstones include jokes written by the actual people buried beneath them. One reads, "I told you I was sick." Another was placed by a widow and simply states, "At least I know where he's sleeping tonight." Key West residents apparently spent their final years planning their grave humor with the same energy other people spend on retirement. The cemetery is now a legitimate tourist attraction that people visit specifically to laugh at dead strangers. 27. Tampa, Florida, has built a remarkable reputation for one very specific achievement that its tourism board does not actively promote in brochures. Tampa consistently ranks among the top 5 cities in America for vehicle theft every single year. Florida overall has more car thefts per capita than almost any other state in the country. Rental car companies operating in Miami have internal training specifically about Florida theft patterns. So visitors from other states park their cars in Florida with the quiet confidence of people who fully expect their vehicle to still be there when they return, and are sometimes very wrong. 28. Florida passed a law in certain counties making it illegal to skateboard without a license. After skateboarding injuries started spiking dramatically in the 1990s, local governments decided the solution was not better safety equipment or improved skate parks, but rather a formal licensing system for teenagers on boards. Nobody has ever been able to fully confirm how many skateboarders actually went through the licensing process. Nobody has confirmed how many were ever ticketed for unlicensed skating. The law exists quietly on the books in several Florida counties, waiting for the day someone decides to enforce it seriously. 29. Approximately 25 million years ago, the entire state of Florida did not exist as land. The whole peninsula was completely submerged under a warm, shallow prehistoric sea and served as ocean floor for millions of years. Ancient shark teeth, whale bones, and sea creature fossils are regularly found buried a few feet underground across the entire state. Florida residents casually dig up prehistoric ocean life in their backyards. The entire foundation of one of America's most populated states is essentially compressed ancient seafloor, which explains a great deal about Florida's structural instability and its tendency to simply collapse without warning. 30. A Florida man walked into a Walmart in Port St. Lucie, selected approximately $476 worth of merchandise, approached the register with complete confidence, and presented the cashier with a $1 million bill as his payment method. So the cashier looked at the bill. The cashier looked at the man. The man looked back expecting change. $1 million bills have never existed in United States currency at any point in American history. The man was arrested. During processing, he reportedly seemed genuinely confused about why this transaction had not gone smoothly and why everyone around him was making such a big deal about it. 31. So Florida passed the Stand Your Ground law in 2005, becoming the very first state in America to put this kind of legislation on the books. The law essentially told Florida residents that retreating from a confrontation was optional and that standing your ground was a legally protected choice. Within the first decade of the law being passed, Florida homicide cases where defendants cited stand your ground tripled. Other states watched Florida introduce this law, observed what happened next, and a significant number of them decided to pass their own versions anyway. Florida once again managed to export its chaos to the rest of the country. 32. A Florida burglar broke into a private home, settled in comfortably at the victim's personal computer, and logged into his own Facebook account to check his messages mid-burglary. He scrolled, he browsed, and then he left the house without logging out. The homeowner returned. found a stranger's Facebook account open and fully active on their screen, took a screenshot, and called the police. Officers had the burglar's full name, profile photo, friend list, and location history within minutes. He was arrested the same day. Florida's criminal community has produced many bold strategies over the years, but this remains one of the most efficient self-arrests in state history. 33. Florida has an actual law making it illegal for a customer to fall asleep under a hairdryer inside a salon. The law does not stop there because Florida never stops there. Both the sleeping customer and the salon owner can be separately fined under the same ordinance, meaning the person who owns the dryer is legally responsible for whatever their customers do underneath it. Some Florida legal historians believe a specific salon incident triggered this law. Nobody has identified which salon. Nobody has identified which sleeping customer. But somewhere in Florida history, someone napped under a dryer long enough to require government intervention. 34. Florida produces over 70% of all orange juice consumed across the United States, making orange juice practically synonymous with the state's entire identity and agricultural economy. Florida puts oranges on its license plates, its welcome signs, and its tourism materials with enormous pride. Then citrus greening disease arrived after 2005 and quietly destroyed nearly 75% of Florida's entire orange crop over the following years. Florida's orange production collapsed to its lowest levels in nearly a century. The state continued putting oranges on everything, while its actual orange trees were dying at a catastrophic rate that most Americans never heard about. 35. Where a Florida man named David Hitzig decided one afternoon that the manatees swimming peacefully in a public Florida waterway needed to experience his karate skills firsthand. He proceeded to practice kicks on the manatees while they floated there doing absolutely nothing to provoke him. What Hitzig apparently did not fully consider before beginning his aquatic karate session was that manatees are federally protected animals under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, making it a serious federal offense to harass them in any way. Rangers arrived. Hitzig was charged. The manatees resumed floating completely unbothered as they always do because that is what manatees do. 36. Florida sits directly on top of the Floridan Aquifer, which is one of the most productive underground water systems on the entire planet, supplying clean drinking water to millions of Florida residents and several surrounding states every single day. Scientists have studied this aquifer extensively and reached a conclusion that Florida's government finds inconvenient. The aquifer is being drained significantly faster than rainfall, and natural processes can ever refill it. Florida continues expanding, building, and growing its population by over 1,000 new residents daily, while sitting on a water supply that is quietly and steadily running out underneath everyone's feet. 37. During the Great Depression, a tiny Florida community with a population of under 200 people needed a name, and the residents decided to name it based on how local children paid for supplies at the general store. Kids would walk in carrying 2 eggs and trade them directly for goods because cash was nearly impossible to come by during those years. The town was named Two Egg, Florida, and that name has remained on official maps and road signs ever since. Two Egg has never grown significantly. Two Egg has never sought fame. Two Egg simply exists quietly as one of the greatest town names in American history. 38. A Florida couple owned a pet alligator they had named Fluffy and kept living inside their home for several years without any particular incident. Neighbors were aware. Nobody called anyone. Florida being Florida, this seemed like a reasonable domestic arrangement to everyone involved. The situation only became an official law enforcement matter when police responded to a domestic dispute call at the residence, entered the home, and Fluffy bit one of the responding officers. The couple was arrested not for years of keeping an alligator in their house, but specifically because their alligator attacked a police officer, which crossed a line even Florida could not ignore. 39. Hialeah, Florida, has a law specifically prohibiting residents from keeping any form of livestock inside a hotel room. This is not a general Florida law. This is a Hialeah-specific ordinance, which means Hialeah experienced enough individual livestock in hotel room incidents to require its own dedicated legislation. City officials apparently watched the situation develop over time, documented multiple separate cases, held a meeting, and concluded that a formal law was the only remaining option. The law does not specify which animals triggered it. It covers all livestock broadly, which suggests the incidents involved an impressive and diverse range of farm animals over the years. 40. In 2022, Florida grew by over 1,000 new residents every single day, without stopping, making it officially the fastest-growing state in the entire United States that year, surpassing even Texas, which had held that title for years. Real estate prices exploded. Traffic conditions in major Florida cities became internationally documented. Our infrastructure, built for a much smaller population, buckled under the pressure of thousands of daily arrivals who all needed housing, roads, water, and services simultaneously. Florida responded to becoming the fastest-growing state in America, the same way Florida responds to everything, which was to keep going and figure out the details later. 41. A Florida man was arrested after walking into a convenience store and proposing a business transaction that he considered completely reasonable. He offered the store clerk one live alligator in exchange for a 12-pack of beer. The clerk accepted. Both the man who brought the alligator and the clerk who took it were charged by responding officers. Florida wildlife officials arrived to collect the alligator. The beer had already been consumed. Nobody involved seemed to understand why any of this required police involvement. 42. Florida has never legally declared English as its official state language, making it one of the only states in America without one. This is a state where Spanish, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and dozens of other languages are spoken daily by millions of residents. Florida legislators have introduced official language bills multiple times over the decades. Each attempt quietly disappeared without passing. Florida essentially decided that picking one official language was too complicated and moved on without ever resolving the question. 43. A Florida judge was presiding over a criminal hearing when the defendant walked in wearing a black robe that was nearly identical to the judge's own robe. The judge stared. The courtroom stared. The defendant apparently thought this was a reasonable outfit choice for his court appearance. The judge dismissed the case mid-hearing, citing an inability to maintain proper courtroom decorum. Florida court records confirm this happened. The defendant walked out of court that day having accidentally beaten his charges entirely through the power of poor wardrobe decisions. 44. Florida's tourism industry generates over $100 billion annually, making the state more economically dependent on outside visitors than almost any other state in America. Florida essentially built its entire economy around convincing people from colder states to come spend money on sunshine. The strategy worked so completely that Florida now cannot function without a constant stream of tourists arriving every single day. Remove the tourists and Florida's financial system faces serious consequences. Florida solved this problem by making itself impossible to stop visiting. 45. Miami, Florida has a law stating that no one may park a truck in front of a woman's home between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. without her explicit written permission. The law applies specifically to trucks and specifically to the hours of darkness. Nobody has confirmed what incident or series of incidents caused Miami officials to write this into law. The truck restriction remains on Miami's books today completely intact. Whatever those trucks were doing outside women's homes in Miami's past was apparently serious enough to require a dedicated nighttime parking ordinance. 46. A Florida high school principal named William Latson was removed from his position after a parent asked him to confirm that the Holocaust was a verified historical fact during an official school meeting. Latson responded that he could not personally confirm it because not everyone believed it happened. This response was reported, investigated, and verified as accurate. He was removed from his position. A Florida court later controversially reinstated him. The case became national news and remains one of the most stunning administrative failures in modern Florida education history. 47. St. Augustine. Florida has a tourist attraction called the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park, built on the exact spot where Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon landed in 1513. The park charges visitors money to drink from a spring on the property. The entire marketing angle is built around the Fountain of Youth legend. Historians have confirmed that Ponce de Leon never actually claimed the spring was magical or restorative in any of his documented writings. Florida built an entire paid tourist attraction around something the main character of the story never said. 48. Florida lawmakers discovered a gap in the existing criminal code and responded by writing a law explicitly stating that selling your own child is illegal in Florida. The fact that this required a specific written law means the previous legal framework had a loophole large enough that prosecutors could not guarantee a conviction without it. Florida legislators sat in a room, identified this gap, and agreed that clarifying the child-selling prohibition was a necessary use of their legislative session. The law passed, and Florida moved forward slightly more covered than before. 49. A Florida man decided to perform a medical procedure on himself using instructions he found on the internet and called 911 before finishing. The procedure was a circumcision. The 911 call was recorded and became part of Florida's permanent public record under the Sunshine Law. Responding paramedics arrived and handled the situation. The man survived. Florida medical professionals use this case in discussions about the dangers of unsupervised internet medical tutorials. The 911 recording exists and is technically accessible to anyone curious enough to search for it. 50. Jules Undersea Lodge in Key Largo, Florida, is a fully functioning hotel where guests sleep, eat, and live 21 feet underwater in Biscayne Bay. It has been operating continuously since 1986. To check-in, guests must scuba dive down to the entrance because there is no other way inside. The lodge offers underwater pizza delivery for guests who get hungry during their stay. Aquanauts, scientists, and tourists have all slept there. Florida looked at the concept of a normal hotel and decided the entire thing needed to be submerged. 51. Miami Beach did not exist naturally, or the entire city was manually dredged up from the bottom of Biscayne Bay, starting in 1913 by engineers, who essentially decided to manufacture an island where open water had always been. Workers pumped sand and sediment from the bay floor and piled it up until land appeared. Mangrove forests were destroyed in the process. Today, Miami Beach hosts millions of visitors annually who have no idea they are standing on a completely artificial island that humans invented just over 100 years ago. I-52. A Florida woman got into a dispute with a man over who had control of the television remote. The argument escalated past words, past shouting, and arrived at the point where she bit off a portion of his ear. Not the whole ear, a portion. The man required medical attention. She was arrested. Why Florida police processed this case without visible surprise? Because in Florida, an ear biting over television programming falls somewhere in the middle of the weekly incident severity scale, and nobody in the department found it particularly remarkable. 53. Florida has a stretch of Interstate 75 running through the Everglades that was officially nicknamed Alligator Alley by the state itself and put on road signs for everyone to see. The nickname exists because alligators regularly cross the highway, causing documented vehicle accidents every single year. Florida did not close the road. Florida did not install sufficient barriers. Florida named the road after the alligators, put up the signs proudly, and continued allowing millions of drivers to travel through it daily, while prehistoric reptiles wandered across the lanes whenever they felt like it. 54. Florida has a law listed under its official obscenity statutes making it illegal to possess, sell, or distribute any item that depicts a chicken in a sexual manner. This law exists in writing inside Florida's actual legal code. A Florida legislator proposed it. Other legislators reviewed it. Enough of them voted yes that it passed and became enforceable law. Legal scholars who have studied Florida's obscenity statutes have noted this particular entry with consistent fascination. Florida has never publicly explained the specific sequence of events that made chicken obscenity legislation feel necessary and urgent. 55. St. Augustine, Florida, was founded by Spanish explorer Pedro Menéndez de Avilés in 1565, making it the oldest continuously occupied European established city in the entire United States. It predates the Mayflower's arrival at Plymouth Rock by 55 full years. While American school children spend significant time learning about Plymouth and the Pilgrims, St. Augustine quietly holds the actual record. Florida has been continuously occupied by European settlers, longer than any other location in America, and somehow this fact remains one of the most consistently overlooked details in standard American history education. 56. A Florida man broke into a stranger's home, explored the kitchen, cooked himself a complete full meal, located the television, watched it for several hours, and then fell asleep on the couch. The homeowner returned while the man was still sleeping comfortably in the living room. Police were called. The man woke up surrounded by officers still apparently relaxed about the whole situation. He was arrested for breaking and entering. Florida court records show he seemed most bothered, not by the arrest but by having his meal and television time interrupted before he was fully rested. 57. Within a 30-mile radius of Orlando, Florida, there are 2 separate Disney parks, Mattu Universal Parks, SeaWorld, Legoland, and several additional major attractions all competing for the same tourists simultaneously. No other place on Earth has this concentration of theme parks in such a small geographic area. Orlando essentially became the theme park capital of the entire planet, not through any natural geographic advantage, but purely because Walt Disney pointed at a Florida swamp in the 1960s, and everyone else followed him there and started building. 58. Florida passed a law making it illegal to intentionally release a helium balloon outdoors. Violators can be charged with littering under Florida Statute 372, which carries real fines and consequences. This means every graduation celebration, every memorial balloon release, and every child who lets go of a balloon at a Florida theme park is technically committing a criminal offense under state law. 40 Florida residents who grew up releasing balloons at celebrations discovered their cherished tradition was actually illegal the entire time, and many of them still have not fully processed this information. 59. Florida's phosphate mining industry is the largest in the United States and supplies approximately 25% of the entire world's phosphate fertilizer, keeping global agriculture functioning at its current scale. This industry operates across massive stretches of central Florida, moving enormous amounts of earth daily. It generates billions of dollars annually and employs thousands of workers. Almost no Florida resident outside the industry knows it exists. Florida tourists visit theme parks and beaches completely unaware that one of the most globally significant mining operations on Earth is running continuously just a short drive inland from their hotel. 60. A Florida man was charged with felony assault after an argument with his roommate about household chores escalated to the point where he threw a full container of macaroni and cheese directly at the roommate's head. The dispute was specifically about doing the dishes. The macaroni and cheese made contact. The roommate filed a police report. Florida prosecutors reviewed the case and determined that a flying macaroni container met the legal threshold for felony assault charges. The roommate recovered. The dishes reportedly remained unwashed after the incident because neither party was in a cooperative mood. 61. Florida has over 935,000 registered boats, making it the most boat-saturated state in America by a significant margin and giving it the highest boat-to-person ratio in the entire country. Florida residents own boats the way other Americans own cars. Marinas in Florida are perpetually full. Boat dealerships operate year-round with consistent demand. Florida waterways on weekends look less like natural ecosystems and more like floating parking lots. Scientists studying Florida's marine environments have noted that the sheer volume of registered boats creates its own category of environmental and navigational challenges. 62. Florida passed a law making it illegal to check into a hotel using a fake name. This was not a general moral guideline. This law was written specifically in response to a documented wave of identity fraud cases that swept through South Beach during the 1980s, when Miami's nightlife scene attracted a remarkable concentration of people who preferred not to use their real names for a wide variety of reasons. Florida officials watched the fraud cases multiply, held meetings, and concluded that the fake name hotel check-in problem had reached a scale requiring dedicated legislation. 63. Cape Canaveral, Florida has launched every single crewed American spaceflight in history, without exception. Alan Shepard lifted off from Cape Canaveral in 1961. The Apollo moon missions launched from Cape Canaveral. Every space shuttle mission departed from Cape Canaveral. Modern SpaceX crewed missions still launch from Cape Canaveral today. No other location in America has ever launched a human being into space. Florida holds an absolute monopoly on American human spaceflight that has lasted over 60 years and shows absolutely no sign of changing anytime soon. 64. A Florida man decided to rob a gun shop, which is already a questionable strategic choice under any circumstances. The specific gun shop he selected was at that exact moment full of armed off-duty police officers who had stopped in to browse ammunition on their day off. The man entered, announced his intentions, and immediately found himself surrounded by multiple armed law enforcement professionals who were not on duty but were absolutely prepared. He was detained on the spot. Florida crime analysts later noted this particular robbery attempt as a strong example of catastrophically poor target selection. 65. Broward County, Florida, has a law allowing residents to keep a pig as a household pet under one very specific condition. Say the pig must weigh under a designated limit and must live exclusively indoors at all times. This means somewhere in Broward County's history, the pig situation became common enough that officials felt weight limits and indoor residency requirements were the appropriate regulatory response. Broward did not ban pigs entirely. Broward created a bureaucratic framework for acceptable pig ownership that includes a weight threshold as its primary enforcement mechanism. 66. Florida completed the Okeechobee Waterway in 1937, creating a man-made canal system that connects the Atlantic Ocean on Florida's east coast directly to the Gulf of Mexico on its west coast, running entirely through inland Florida. Ships can travel completely across the state without ever touching open ocean. The entire waterway bisects Florida like a liquid highway cutting straight through the middle of the peninsula. Engineers spent years digging, redirecting, and connecting waterways to make this happen. Florida essentially installed a shortcut through itself for boats, and nobody outside the maritime industry seems to know it exists. 67. A Florida city commissioner was removed from office after investigators discovered he had been secretly living inside his office at City Hall for over a year. He had moved personal belongings in gradually, established a sleeping area, and was using city facilities as his full-time private residence, entirely rent-free. Colleagues had noticed certain signs but had not connected them into the full picture until an investigation confirmed the arrangement. He was removed from his position. Florida ethics officials processed the case and noted it represented a creative, if entirely illegal, approach to the city's housing costs. 68. Florida's panther population collapsed so severely by the 1970s that wildlife biologists counted just 20 individual animals remaining in the entire wild. 20. For an apex predator that once roamed freely across the southeastern United States, this was one of the closest brushes with complete extinction ever recorded for any large mammal in American history. Conservation efforts were launched urgently. Florida panthers were placed under federal protection. The population has recovered partially but remains critically endangered. Florida's state animal came within a single bad decade of disappearing from Earth entirely and permanently. 69. Florida has a law listed inside its official obscenity statutes, making it illegal to possess, sell, or distribute any item that depicts a chicken in a sexual manner. A Florida legislator wrote this. Colleagues reviewed it. Enough voted yes that it became enforceable law. Legal scholars studying Florida statutes have noted this entry with remarkable consistency over the years. Florida has never held a press conference explaining which specific sequence of events made chicken obscenity legislation feel like an urgent priority that required immediate attention from the state government. 70. A Florida man was pulled over during a routine traffic stop, and when officers approached the vehicle, they discovered he had installed a fully functioning portable hot tub in the bed of his pickup truck. The hot tub was filled with water. It was operational. 4 passengers were actively soaking in it, while the truck moved down a public Florida road at highway speed. No safety equipment was visible. The driver seemed unbothered by the stop. Officers stood beside the truck processing what they were looking at before anyone spoke. Florida has produced many traffic stops, but this one required a longer pause than most. 71. Florida was the 4th state to secede from the Union in 1861, charging enthusiastically into the Confederacy with considerable political energy. Then, the actual fighting began. By the end of the Civil War, Florida had contributed fewer soldiers than any other Confederate state because a significant portion of its population simply refused to show up. Historians have documented widespread resistance, desertion, and flat refusal among Florida men who had opinions about secession, but significantly fewer opinions about personally participating in a war. Florida left the Union loudly, and then quietly contributed almost nothing to the cause it had demanded so forcefully. And that was Florida, a state that outlawed singing in a swimsuit, named a highway after the animals actively attacking drivers on it, built an entire city on a hole in the ground, and somehow convinced the rest of America that this is all completely normal. Florida is not a place. Florida is a warning that nobody reads. So here is your question for today. If you had to live in Florida for one full year with no escape, well, which one of these 71 dumbest things would make you pack your bags and leave on day one? Drop your answer in the comments right now because I need to know. And if you enjoyed this video, do not forget to hit like and subscribe to Dumbest Things because we are just getting started. Every state has secrets, every state has chaos, and we are coming for all of them.